All right, thank you, Marcus Mera, and he had the IBM PC Junior and all that great box software from Sierra Online. That was a great presentation. Thank you, Corey, for doing the camera work and questions there. Next up, we have Ken Williams, who was one of the founders of Sierra, and he's here with us. He's going to give a presentation, and they take questions afterwards. Welcome, Ken. How are you doing today?
Very good. Very happy to be here.
Yeah, we're happy to have you too. People were not sure that they read that right. Ken Williams is going to be on there. How is that possible? He's like a very famous guy in vintage computer history.
Well, okay. Thank you.
All right. So you ready for your presentation here?
Sure. Why not?
All right.
Let's do this. Am I on? Am I doing it? Is this it?
You're on live, and everybody's watching you now.
Greetings, everyone. I'm excited to be here and talk about Sierra Online. And and thanks everybody for remembering us. I mean, the company, basically my role at the company ended almost 25 years ago, but people still remember it, which is kind of amazing. What I was going to do, give a quick history of Sierra, talk about what it was like developing games in prehistoric times, 1979. I just wrote a book about Sierra, and I'll probably plug my book, and then I'll take some questions from anybody that has any questions. Quick story, founded the company in 1979, ran it for 20 years, started developing for the Apple II. We shifted in 83 to the PC, wanted to keep going on the Apple II, but it really wouldn't do the graphics and didn't have the horsepower we needed, and the Mac never really took off as a game machine. Let's see, we dominated. I mean, we really kind of owned the PC entertainment market toward the end of the life at the company. We had around 1,000 employees in 1996 when I sold the company. Yeah, and a lot of the book is about the sale of the company and what happened and why you haven't heard of Sierra today. Products, most people know us for the adventure games, and we're still kind of considered the adventure game company. But we did a lot more than that. We had a lot of flight sims, productivity products. I was trying to push us deeper into education. We had action games. Half-Life's one people have heard of, Leisure Suit Larry. We were divided into a bunch of divisions, and a lot of what I did was just fly around and meet with the different divisions. You know, my life, I used to describe myself as a professional airplane rider. And that's what I did, because some of these, like Cocktail Vision was in Paris, and I had to go over and visit them, and Papyrus was on the East Coast. So that was what we did. And during the years that I ran Sierra, as you can see, it was kind of a transformation, starting as kind of a hippie living in the woods, having fun, and then becoming kind of the corporate type as the company matured. So big difference in culture at Sierra over the years. Anyway, I'll go back to 1979 when I started Sierra. Really, I had never seen a computer, and then I happened to run into the TRS-80 and thought it was pretty cool machine. Bought one. And at the time, it was only a cassette drive. I was loading programs off of cassette, and I kind of had this vision at the time of programming a Fortran compiler for the TRS-80. We used to call it the Trash 80, and I assume people still do. But Microsoft had written BASIC for the TRS-80, and there were no other programming languages. And I'd been a computer programmer in LA for years before that, and doing compiler development, and wanted to see if I couldn't put a Fortran compiler on the TRS-80. And started on that when the Apple II came along, and my wife got involved in Roberta Williams, who many of you might know. She started playing a game on a teletype machine I had that was called Colossal Cave, that was running at MIT. And she played it, and she thought it was pretty fun. And even on the TRS-80, we grabbed some of, I think it was the TRS-80, it might have been the Apple II. A guy named Scott Adams had written some text adventure games, and she played through all of those, and then started lobbying me to dump the Fortran compiler and start working on a game for her. And and then she upgraded me that year from my TRS-80 to an Apple II, which was a much better machine. And the best part about it was that it suddenly had a floppy disk drive. And coding off a cassette tape was not very practical, but suddenly I had the Apple II and it had a floppy drive, and it was pure heaven for me as a programmer. And she wanted me to do this game that she had talked about called Mystery House, that was going to be a kind of a murder mystery type game. And she took me to dinner one night. Well, actually, she pitched me on the game, and I said no because I was too busy with my Fortran compiler. But then she took me to dinner and started talking it up and got me excited about the idea of doing the game. But the Apple II, as powerful as it wasn't quite ready to do games, or at least I didn't think so. Especially, she mapped out the game with like 80 different locations. If anybody's ever played an adventure game, you go to various locations, solve puzzles, and then go to a new place. And she wanted, well, actually, I think I was the one that suggested pictures. And then when she got all excited about the idea, I realized that I probably shouldn't have said that because it was impossible. And but then I kind of had the idea of doing vectored graphics, which is pretty standard these days, but in 1979 nobody had heard of. And how you get those in. She kind of drew like this house on a piece of paper, and there was something called a VersaWriter sold that was based. It looked like a joystick to the computer. It gave me an X and a Y position, and so I had her take her hand-drawn drawings of each of the locations in her game, tape them to this little VersaWriter, and then move that little arm around, pick different points, and mark endpoints. And I discovered that by focusing on endpoints of lines instead of the entire line, that it would condense an entire picture to 50 to 100 bytes. And that allowed us to do hundreds of locations and put it on a floppy. And the floppy disks, for those that have coded for those old drives, didn't hold a whole bunch. And I forget what it was. I think 100K, something like that, which is not a lot of data when you got to fit the whole game on there, plus the operating system, plus everything else. We started marketing it. This was we kind of put together ourselves, and it's pretty ugly, but it worked. In fact, what happened was I was still working on my Fortran compiler, and Moore did the game to kind of get her off my back. It was, and even it was what worked out really nice for us was that because I didn't really want to have to code the game, I'm more focused on creating tools for her, who was a non-programmer, to build the game. So I gave her, in effect, she coded by using plain old yellow notepads and writing down things. I told her just make a list of the rooms and then start a new page and make a list of in each room or location what could be done in that room, and then start another page and write down what commands she wanted the game to react to. And then I gave her a little word processor to type things in. So I just focused on writing tools. And the beauty of that was once she had done the game and it took off, then we could do other games using all that same methodology or those same tools that I'd written. And that's why this one isn't labeled. It says high-res adventure. There wound up being a high-res adventure 2 and 3, and then we went back and did a 0. But she kind of developed the game herself. And when we had an early version of it, I took it to a store, and I was still busily working on my compiler. And the computer store in Northridge, suddenly everybody loved her game, and nobody seemed very excited about my compiler. So it became pretty obvious we were going to be a game company, not a compiler company. So, and Mystery House, when we shipped it, sold crazy well, insanely well. I don't remember how many copies we sold, but it was in the tens of thousands. And we were living at the time in LA and hating LA traffic, and kind of had this vision of raising our kids in the woods. So we moved up to Yosemite National Park, just outside of it, in a little town called Oakhurst, and started doing more games and started publishing games for others. And one thing that became pretty apparent was that the black and white and vector graphics wasn't going to excite too many people too long. So Roberta started pushing me for color. And I took a look at doing a game called Wizard and Apprentice, and I look at this now and it looks pretty horrible. And I forget that it was the basis for the company. But the Apple II at the time really didn't do color. You could kind of pull off color by taking advantage of the artifacting. And I remember when Wozniak kind of saw this for the first time, he was kind of surprised. He hadn't thought that the Apple II would do these kinds of graphics. And as you see kind of the checkered board approach. And it was because within a given byte, you could only get, I think it was either purple, green, or orange and blue. So you can see that like the worst possible case was when you had something blue next to something green. And and you could also see that because there were so few colors, what I did to simulate more colors was to mix in blue and black dots or green and black dots to get like a dark green or a dark blue. And and this is still vector drawn. This was done on the old Versa writer that I showed in the prior picture. And you can see that, and the other thing that would happen was I could color things in by having Roberta take that Versa writer and click anywhere within a hollow area on the picture, and it would flood color outward. And the Apple II was so slow that you could actually watch the color get drawn in those days. So I was constantly trying to optimize those routines to get the thing a little bit faster. And I wound up writing a book that still probably those of you who are trying to code for the 6502 called Apple II Computer Graphics. And it's still available. I bought a copy when I was researching my new book just out of curiosity, and I found it on Amazon. And it quickly was pretty boring. I'm not going to code for the 6502 again anytime soon. One of the magics of Sierra in the early days, I mentioned that we started by doing tools, and it became, I guess because of my background, I'd been in compiler development, and I was always focused on building technologies that other people could use to produce products. And so when it came time for the Apple II, I was very interested in being able to use a higher level language, and came up with something called the Adventure Game Interpreter. The original games, the original Mystery House and Wizard and Apprentice and Cranston Manor, and I think even Time Zone, were done using that same where they had used a yellow notepad and kind of in effect code by making up series of tables that the game would interpret. But then at some point, we started coding for the IBM PC Junior, which was a little higher horsepower machine, and we wanted to do animation. So for that, we wanted to build our own kind of procedural language. And by having our own programming language, and there was nothing in those days. I mean, I couldn't have coded in C if I'd wanted to. And if I'd had, I mean, maybe we could have, but I don't think so. I mean, we kind of had to invent our own language. I mean, today if you code, you have your own, you have Visual Studio and you have interactive debuggers, and none of that existed then. But I guess because of my background, we wanted to build our own programming language and compile it to, at one point I coded a language called Pascal, and the way Pascal worked, it was kind of a C-like language that compiled to something called P code, which was, it was like an assembly language for an imaginary machine. And that was the approach we took, was that we did our own little language, and we compiled to machine code for an imaginary machine. And that was nice because at that time, hardware was changing so fast that in order to adjust to the new changes that Apple would do as they, as they would transform their hardware, and as the PC came along, and the PC was kind of a moving target, by having our own little programming language, we were able to keep up with it. And that was part of what made Sierra always kind of ahead of the pack, is that we had our AGI programming language, and then later we did a major update to it and called it SCI. And most of our games are coded in our internally developed language, and that allowed us to move faster from platform to platform. And with that, I should mention my book. For those that don't know the story, the quickie recap, this was just a picture somebody sent me of their having bought my book. which is available at Amazon. And if you go to kensbook.com, it talks about it there. But yeah, Sierra went through kind of a crazy time, and that from Roberta and I starting it, it grew to 1,000 employees scattered everywhere. We really owned the charts, and I remember we even had a competition versus Electronic Arts, where we were going to give everybody in the company 10 shares of stock on the day that we passed Electronic Arts, and we did that, a couple of years before we sold the company. But then we sold the company, and that became a major fiasco, and that the new guys kind of locked me out, I guess, or took me out of the action, and thought they knew more than me, and that didn't turn out so well for anybody. And today, other than I think King's Quest, there's still some games being made, and Leisure Suit Larry, but overall, Sierra's pretty dead. And with that, I'll take any questions if anybody's got any.
All right, so Ken, thank you for that presentation. And I think you were surprised about how excited people are to see you, because I think a lot of these games that people played, it was very personal to them. They spent many hours as a kid or maybe as an adult playing these games, and it was really special to them. So I think that you being the creator of a lot of these games in the company, I think, is why there's such excitement about it.
Yeah, it surprises the hell out of us. I mean, like when I sat down to write the book about Sierra, I figured, who could possibly care? And really thought I was writing it, maybe for our kids or family or something. And then suddenly, when it came out, there was a couple of thousand copies the first day, and that's kind of humbling, I guess, for Roberta and I. We really didn't expect that. So there's still a lot of people that, even though it's been 25 years, that still think of Sierra. And we got all these emails and postings and stuff about how a lot of people are in software engineering or game design because of Sierra back in the old days. So it is it's pretty wild.
All right, Chris has some questions to ask.
I just want to say, as soon as you mentioned your book, which I had never heard of before, I did a search for it, and I found a PDF online and downloaded it because I'm trying to teach myself 6502 machine language. So I'm looking forward to reading through that. We do have some questions. Which of your tools was the most challenging tool to create?
Well, I mean, in the beginning of the company, everything was. I mean, there was different times, like at the beginning, writing that first interpreter for Roberta, because there wasn't even an assembler in those days. Or I guess there was. There was Lisa that we wound up marketing, or Liza, I think I pronounced it, which was the 6502 assembler. And, if you're learning 6502, is that what you're using to code, or is that still the assembler? Well, I guess I don't know, but
yes,
yeah, that's still it.
People coding in 6502. So yes, I guess you don't have a real conception of how pervasive the vintage computer community is, and it's growing every year. So yes, there's a lot of people that code in that. I don't know for a job. I don't know how much it's done, but I know definitely in the hobby, it's
Wow.
a lot of people using it a lot.
Yeah, I remember it was a cool processor and fun to code for. So no, at the beginning days, I mean, that was probably the toughest thing to do, was just to do anything. I mean, because there were no text editors, there were no graphics editors. No matter what you wanted to do, you had to do it yourself. Even I remember Copy Protect, because at that time you could talk directly to the hardware, and reverse engineering some of Apple's code and trying to copy protect the disks, and creating a whole industry out there of hackers. Kind of the day we'd release a game, would have to figure out how to reverse engineer it and get at it.
Yeah, that was the one thing that I mentioned yesterday. Was I wanted to do an exhibit, and the exhibit would be on the battle between the pirates, who would defeat the copy protection, and the companies who would make new and more difficult copy protection for the software, and then the copy program manufacturers, software developers that would make software to defeat that, for people that are less adept at hacking. So that was something that I thought was very interesting.
Yeah, people don't relate to it today because on the internet, it's much easier to kind of lock down whether or not people bought or not. But in those days, I mean, yeah, it was a floppy and people could go over to their friend's house and copy the floppy.
Yep.
So yeah, different world. Well, I went through it with my book. You write this book, my most recent one, and I tried to decide, do I really want to put a PDF out there because they're so easily moved from person to person? And then I thought about it, and I said, I don't really care. I'm not trying to make money on the book. If people pirate, and there's not much you can do about it. Yeah, but because there's no way to copy protect a PDF, I don't think. But anyway, sorry.
Well,
What
that's
else you
very
got in there?
generous of you. I'm sure we definitely appreciate that, and we definitely try to share information when we're not infringing on somebody's intellectual property. So we appreciate it. A few more questions. Could documentation on those internal tools be posted 30 years later, or did EA took everything and buried it?
There's websites. If somebody Googles the three letters AGI and then Sierra or SCI, I think AGI stood for Adventure Game Interpreter and SCI for Sierra's Creative Interpreter. And if you look for those, you'll find them. And they're out there. There's websites dedicated to them. People reverse engineered our code. And I noticed for like AGI, that there were hundreds of games that people had built using our old adventure game interpreter. And yeah, it was pretty powerful for the time. It would do a lot of stuff. So yeah, all that stuff seems to be out on the web. Even our animation editors, graphics editors. I found a lot of broken links. I wanted to go out and kind of play with it myself. But and I'm sure that if I had hunted around enough, I could have found stuff. But it's out there. Yeah, the internet's an amazing thing. So.
I think it's possible that this person was asking, do you personally still have the original information that you would be willing to post? That at least that's what I would thinking when it goes through my head,
I
like,
know, I
the
don't.
legit, original stuff.
There was no cloud to back things up on in those days. And in fact, I found when we were going through our warehouse, a plastic tray with a bunch of my old floppies on it. And I wondered what was on them. And, but I never took, because I didn't have an Apple II with a floppy drive. And we kind of took an old warehouse that we had full of stuff that Roberta and I had, just shipped it off to a museum in New York, figuring, maybe they could do something with it. But I don't know if they ever actually booted all those floppies to see what was on them. But we personally have really nothing. Al Lowe kept the old source code to all of his games. He wrote Leisure Suit Larry, and it was funny in that there's a story in the book, or most people I think kind of know it, where he tried to put the source code to his old games online on eBay and offer it for sale, the original floppies with all of his source code. And kind of overnight, it was valued at like $10,000. And he got a nasty letter from Activision, who currently owns the rights, saying, don't do that. And he had to pull it offline. But there's a lot of interest in that old source code and those old utilities. But no, I don't have anything. I probably should have kept it, but I'm kind of a by the book guy. And when I left the company, I signed one of those pieces of paper saying I wasn't taking anything with me. Like, I'd love to have all my old email and stuff, but I don't think any of that stuff exists anymore. So.
Yeah, if only we had known what the future was going to look like. So another question, how many people worked for Sierra during the original days?
Well, I mean, the original days was me and Roberta. She did the design, she did the art, I did the coding. And it probably took, I'm trying to think, probably the first year we grew to like 50 employees or something. And it was kind of cool. We were up. There's another book about the early days of Sierra by Stephen Levy called Hackers. That's kind of fun because it talks about the very founding when we moved to Yosemite and started hiring really young kids. I mean, we had kids as young as 16 and 17, and we rented a house and put all the programmers in it. And we had all these young guys that would kind of party and write code. And then we had some crazy times, like when the author of a game called Frogger lost his source code toward the end of development. And there was no cloud at those days. There were no source control systems. None of that existed. If you lost your floppy, you lost your game. And he was pretty depressed getting it. I imagined that, when I was writing my book, and I thought, boy, if I lost my copy, what would I do? It'd be tough to go back and do it again. So, but what else is that? Well, no, we grew. I mean, it was like we grew to about 130 employees in '83, and then we kind of hit the skids briefly, and then fired up again, and then kind of nonstop grew to like 1,000 employees.
So. Oh, wow. Were your games successful outside of North America, such as in Europe?
Yeah, we were. We at some point, I realized that there was Europe out there. We'd been kind of licensing our games to people, but I don't forget what year, maybe like 91, something like that. We acquired a company called Cocktail Vision that was based in Versailles over in France. And they started converting our games to different languages and distributing the games in Europe. And by the time we sold the company, over half our revenue was coming out of Europe. So we were pretty happy with that. It was huge. And a lot of it was because of this guy, Roland Oskian, who ran our European operation and just did a fantastic job. So Europe was big for us.
Cool. So this question is referring to something called SCUM VM, SCUMM VM, and it says, "Are you aware of it, and or have you contributed to it?" And then he goes on to explain a little bit what that is. But do you know what that is?
No, I don't know what it. I've seen the name.
It's a program which allows you to run certain classic graphical point-and-click adventure games and role-playing games, provided you already have their data files. The clever part about this is ScumVM just replaces the executables shipped with the games, allowing you to play them on systems for which they were never designed. That's interesting.
Cool.
So you're not familiar with that?
I wanted to see some of the old games and found by Googling that there are places you can go and play almost any of the old games. And I assume some of them are running on something like Scum or something where people have found ways to execute our old games. Since all of our games are developed, and like I mentioned, compiled to a P code, if somebody wrote an interpreter for any machine, then there it is. There it's running. So, yeah, I think our old games, they're fun to play. And it was a different kinds of games in some ways because they were smaller, simpler, kind of, when I look at today's games and I look at, and I try to think, I got a weekend free. I want to go play the game. Some of these, it takes all weekend to just kind of get in the groove or figure out what's going on. Our old games are kind of fun. You just get in there and play. So
a few more. And thank you very much for taking the time to answer all these.
Thanks.
So this is a very personal one here. Ken, do you still have any of the old original game cover artwork? Looking for the ones my dad did for you, Duke Haubelt, Haubelt,
I don't have any of those. No, I don't know which
Duke,
game
right?
his father did. No, unfortunately, I don't know.
Okay.
Plus I was pretty removed when we started getting, where you've got 1,000 employees, you suddenly are dealing with a VP of marketing who deals with a director of marketing who deals with an art department, who finally somebody that actually does work for a living gets involved. So, no, I didn't preserve it. Like I said, I was kind of a by the book guy, so I didn't take any of that art.
Yeah.
And I heard that at the end of the company, some of the people took home artwork and luckily preserved it. And some of those old paintings are still around, but I don't have them. And I heard that 95% of that stuff was just taken out in the woods and taken to a trash dump. That it's really sad. We had all these carefully preserved archives, and people they weren't smart when they shut down the company. But oh well, depressing.
Did you actually see the Netflix High Score documentary when it was done? And if so, what did you think of the final cut in terms of representing your work and that history?
Yeah, it was funny when they called us. They came out to film, and were there for like a week and shot so much. And they, well, I don't know if they didn't know or they didn't want to tell us, but we had the impression that we were going to be like 2 hours or something because they shot so much footage, and they edited it all down to 10 minutes. And the beauty, I guess, of having 100 hours of footage to chop to 10 minutes is you get a really great 10 minutes. So when we watched it. We liked it, but it came and went pretty quick. And at the end of it, Roberta and I looked at each other and said, God, did they ever mention Sierra or any of our products? And we couldn't think if they did or not. So it was, that was kind of weird. It's fun footage. It's real entertaining. It's real short. And it doesn't, we liked it. I mean, yeah. And we watched Richard Garriott's segment. He did Ultima for us, and it was kind of fun to see him again. I hadn't seen him in a lot of years, but so I don't know if that answers the question.
I think so. So
Yeah.
there's a YouTuber called Metal Jesus Rock. His real name is Jason. He's been
Oh
trying.
yeah.
He's been saying forever. Wait. I'm trying to read what it said here. You've been work on Sierra. Do you remember him?
I do, and apparently he went on to great fame and fortune as a YouTube influencer. So I mean, it's great to see some of the Sierra alumni that actually did well, and
Oh, wow.
he's one of them. And yeah, I watched one of his videos where he was talking about life at Sierra before I even knew that he was popular on YouTube, and you could sense the fun. So that was good. Yeah, and I wrote him, and then I discovered he's this famous guy. So what the heck? Congratulations to him. But I
Very
remember
nice.
him from the old days working there.
Great. Do you and Roberta have a personal favorite from all the games you released? One that you are most proud of?
Roberta loves, she did this series kind of early with a female protagonist, which was kind of innovative for the time, called Laura Bow and Colonel's Bequest. And I remember at the time everybody wondering, would players be willing to play a game where they're playing a female character? And that was popular and nobody cared. Everybody loved it, enjoyed the game. And me, what's funny is I never really was a gamer. I liked working with people that developed games, but I was more of a technology guy than I was ever a gamer. I liked, we had a division called Dynamics, and I liked the flight sim. So I liked the pinball game. I liked their incredible machine. I mean, they did really nice stuff. So I was more a fan of their games. So,
Cool. I think I missed this question here. What was your favorite game to work on and favorite game to play, Sierra or otherwise?
well, let's see. I talked about what I like to play as far as work on. The last game I really kind of worked on was, I think in Leisure Suit Larry, there were some gambling games, and I coded the poker game in there. And I coded at the beginning of Leisure Suit Larry, it kind of does a screening to figure out how old you are. And I wrote all that. That was kind of my idea. It was to keep kids out. But it looks like they're going to about to pull the hook on me. So I'll thank everybody and wish you well and enjoy the day.
One more quick
Oh,
one here. Can I still get my Survived the Night at Mystery House t-shirt?
no. those are rare these days. I had one that was in our storage unit, and I think it went to the museum. Those were pretty cool shirts. We did some fun stuff in those days. You can see why we did well. So, yeah, I think that's it.
Great. All
Okay,
right.
well,
Yes.
enjoy,
All right,
everybody.
Ken. Hey, thank you very much, Ken, for coming and doing that talk. It was a great surprise addition to our show. I'm sure there's going to be a lot more people interested in having questions in the Discord channel. So if you need me to tell you how to direct you to that, we can do that.
Yeah, send me an email and I'll flip over to there and see if anybody has more questions. And there'll probably be questions at the bottom of the YouTube, and I'll check there.
Oh, definitely, definitely. So, just one little side note. So, you had mentioned that about the book Apple II Graphics that you wrote.
Yeah.
You might want to, if you haven't already, look at Stephen Edwards' video that we did yesterday. He did for 30 minutes about Apple II Graphics. He might even have that book referenced in that video. I don't remember distinctly, but he might. So look at that one. You might be interested.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody still prints it or if when you buy it on Amazon, they're recycling old copies. So I just placed an order and it came. So kind of funny.
And next year we are going to we're going to have two themes, but one of the themes is tax adventures. So might be interested. I hopefully if we have a live show in April, I'm hoping to get Scott Adams here.
Uh-huh.
Talk. And also the guy who wrote Colossal Caves, William Crowther. So
Cool.
that's just a sign out to you. And then that's it. Oh, thank you very much for coming and presenting. It's really exciting. A lot of people are enjoying that you're here and giving this talk.
Okay, well, thank you and good luck with your show. And I hope by April the world is normal and you can do it the
Yes.
right way. So,
Yes, and we're
okay.
open for April. Thank you. Have a great day.
See you later. Bye.
Bye.
Why did I click?